All right. So this is the Composite, and I am the host, Deanne Battle. We're in season 5, episode 7. And so for those that are uninitiated, this is just a labor of love where we have an opportunity to talk about current events, pop culture, and most importantly, art, and have a dialogue and conversations with artists. And the artist that we're speaking with this evening is Mr. Amit Shah. And I just want to take an opportunity here to read from his bio. Okay. So, Amit Shah has toiled in book publishing for decades as an editor and publisher and co founder and published a literary magazine, Turnstile, in the late 1990s, which the Library Journal said, quote, was excellent, representative of some 2 dozen contributors who give a great deal of pleasure to the reader lucky enough to pick up this much above average literary journal, end quote. Amit now lives in Somerville, Massachusetts, with his cat Kobi. His previous work has appeared in small press magazines, Monograph, Thimble Lit, The Raven's Perch, and Turnstile. His book reviews, feature articles, and interviews have appeared in the Louisville Courier-Journal, Publishers Weekly, Small Press Magazine, Cineaste, and Outlook. Excuse me. He blogs at amitshah.substack.com, and you'll see the link to that below this video of the interview. His debut collection, Instincts of Beauty, was published in 2021. Monograph wrote, quote, the brilliant Amit Shah, his writing deserves to be read and reread. It is some of the best writing Monograph has ever seen, end quote. His second collection, which we'll be discussing this evening, Revisiting the Minds, Essays and Excavations, was published in December 2024. All right. And so without further ado, we present to you from the composite, Mr. Amit Shah. So, Amit, thank you for joining us this evening.
Thank you for having me.
Yes. And, I've got a little, ad on Instagram and everything showing the beautiful cover here. But what I hoped we could start with is talk to me a little bit about the genesis of this project, how you got the idea for Revisiting the Minds.
Yes, I'm interested in writing about the past, memory essays, and I focus on the memories that I know best, which are mine. And in all honesty, I didn't approach it for many years because writing about honestly about oneself is I I felt was quite daunting. And then I had this idea of excavations. I was actually going to Italy, and one of the places I was going to was Pompeii, and so excavations were, front and center for me at that time of my mind. And I thought about this collection as something that I would dig into, dig deeper into my life, and write about uh, not just what I was remembering, the perspective, but also if there are any lessons that I've learned from that. And so that was the beginning of it. The cover came to me after I got the title down, and it's a photograph that I had taken in Istanbul, Turkey, of um, of a 15th century waterworks, which is underground, that supplied fresh water to Istanbul and was created a long, long time ago. Actually, it was long before the 15th century. I think they finished it then, but it was from Roman times. So I took this, it's a tourist venue. And so they have good lighting or interesting lighting. And so I took this because it felt eerie, it felt, but it also was of interesting to me, um, and kind of fit the writing, the content of the essays.
Yeah, I like that. Thank you. And then I like this idea of, not only focusing on your perspective, but in terms of thinking about like lessons. So I think, if we can come back to that, um, that would be great. So you were a publishing professional. So here's the thing. I think sometimes as a writer, because I'm just so focused on, my work in progress, I don't necessarily think about, the writing life and the careers of publishing professionals. So how did you decide to make the switch, so to speak? Or did you always see yourself as a publisher, editor, and writer?
I think I always saw myself as that. And finally, when I started writing, which I wrote uh, nonfiction book reviews and all of that, but I didn't seriously start writing till um, after my retirement from publishing. But when I put these books together with the publisher gave me a lot of leeway, which is I presented um, the writing and the book fully laid out, and we went back and forth on some details, but I was very clear about what it would look like. I had a very clear sense. So that's my publishing background. I put books together pretty much three-quarters of my life, and so they have great meaning for me. You know.
Mhm. Do you feel as if, and we'll talk about this a bit later, because Instincts of Beauty, which you published in 2021, do you feel as if because you had that industry knowledge that put you at an advantage when you started publishing your own work? Your full collections. I know you have
Yeah,
published other
I
pieces.
I thought that I found a publisher who was who had a lot of experience and was willing to work with me, to make it as good as possible, not just the look of it, but also in the copy editing, which I was completely open to. The copy editor for Revisiting the Minds, I did give her a shout out in the acknowledgments because she did make some things better, because we had a dialogue going. And from my publishing experience, I know that that's what the writer-editor relationship is sometimes not a good one, which is unfortunate because um, editors are only trying to make things better. So that helped a lot. Um, and I think hopefully the publisher thought that things worked out well because I presented, a fully laid out manuscript, from the front matter to the author bio. Yeah. And in
From
fact,
A to Z.
the current volume has a number of illustrations, images, photographs, and three paintings. And I laid that out. I mean, I specified where uh, the illustrations would go. Yeah.
There's a very natural rhythm that I find, in the reading between, text and image. It's not like sometimes like it's like, oh, I'm reading 50 pages and then there's one picture and then, you don't as a reader have a sense of that curation, but that really stuck out to me, as I continued to work through the collection. And as I was looking through it, I just one day I was like sitting there drinking coffee. I said, wait a minute. And I just went and I just counted how many images that I saw and where I saw them. And I was like, okay. So there's a rhythm to that even, within your work. Um, Something you
I,
said sparked another question for me. Now, I was at a panel for the New York Public Library, and they were, talking to emerging writers about, well, how does one get an agent? How does one publish? These are pretty standard conversations. But they also talked about how there can be a little bit of tension between the writer and the editor. So, in your opinion, what are like maybe the top two or three things that might go awry when that relationship doesn't work out?
I think that writers, when it doesn't work out, the writer is so close to the manuscript, so close to the writing that um, any kind of creative effort goes through this is that they're too close. They don't see um, perhaps that there it could be better or the little things that could be corrected, and we see that all the time. Um, Things get published because I'm sure that the editor and the writer um, didn't agree or didn't come to a compromise, right? Um, I think that in the worst cases, um, on page 5 is a typo, and then you go, every 10 pages, the typos start increasing, and you realize what's happened is that tenses, perspective, sentences are getting have only had one set of eyes and not two. I think that's the worst case. The best ones, you don't even realize that there has been an editor. Yeah.
All right. So if I'm understanding correctly, a lot of that tension might just be, from the writer, you know, babying their
Yeah.
project and maybe not being as open to expanding or changing.
Right. Right.
Okay.
I think that that's absolutely the case. Uh, it is it, it is a relationship that has to be nurtured because the the artist, the writer, this is that person's creation, and so in entrusting that to an editor to make it better, um, takes some not only an effort but also trust. And sometimes in the speed of publishing today, perhaps that's missing sometimes.
Okay. Okay, thank you. Now, Instincts of Beauty, again, that was your first collection in 2021. Um, how would you say that compares thematically or in terms of your process, versus revisiting the mines?
Yeah, that's an interesting question because I feel like the current revisiting the mind is, I, I want to say it's a more finished work, but I would rephrase that into that I'm much more satisfied with the pacing of the second one than I was with the first. But the first one was an idea. I mean, this is, it's storytelling. Um, the essay writing is storytelling, and I wanted to find a way to tell stories, the narrative, not in its um, mainly traditional way, which is a short story. But someone said recently to me, I read your book of short stories and I was going to correct this person. And then I thought, you know what? They are very, very short stories. Some of they're sometimes 5 or 6 pages long. And that's what I was trying to do, is to find a way of narrating that is somewhat new. of course, it's not new. I mean, it's been happening since Joyce broke out of the of the mold. But yeah, so that's where I am, is trying to tell the story in a slightly different way. Yeah.
Okay, awesome. I would like to, just a second here, chat a bit about one piece in particular here. Just a second. So, revisiting the minds. This is one of the shorter pieces, page 57, To Look Without Fear. Now, there are a couple of reasons this sticks out to me, and one would be your scholarship within this text. I think a lot of the essays that I read now are online, in different online journals, magazines. But
Yeah.
your scholarship, the ways in which you quote other writers and artists, but then you also weave it in to what you're saying, right? So it's not just like, oh, um, an epigraph at the beginning, but rather you're in dialogue with Hemingway. You're in dialogue with these writers. So, with that being said, um, how does that enhance the process for you? Because not everyone does that. Some essayists are very much, this is my voice, my experience, my universe that I'm creating. Whereas you, I feel like it's porous. It's partly your universe, but you're also responding externally. So was that a deliberate decision, or have you always written like that?
It's a deliberate decision, but I've also been very attracted to that because I am indebted to these writers that I'm quoting. They not only are they don't know this, but they're my friends, and they've gone through a process, and they've been very successful, and they've written about that process, and I quote as I see fit about that process. A lot of times, when I've taken writing courses, there'd be uh, readings that are suggested, etc. And I've always thought that if there was a book of writing, about writing, then it would be full of extracts from other writers, because we haven't. It's not like I'm creating a new genre out here of this narrative style. There are there's a writer that I came across recently, new to me, but has been around for a long time. There's a small book called I Remember, and they are just one or two sentences filling the, about a memory. And the whole book is just that,
Wow.
you know. Yeah. And so they're like prompts. They're like writing prompts. Now, this person's broken uh, out of how to narrate uh, the story, right? So I am very attracted to different forms of narration. I mean, of course, I love reading, something that is linear, a beginning, middle, and an end. But I am also extremely interested in how the form is manipulated, because basically I'm a storyteller and I'm telling uh, the same kind of story that's been told for thousands of years. Yeah, yeah.
Wow, thank you. And we'll stay with To Look Without Fear for a moment. And I'm just going to read a couple of lines here. So from page 57, going to 58. Um, if I couldn't notice what was in front of me a minute ago, I wondered about my memories of a decade ago. What did I remember? Well, truth is a word that might be carved into the pedestal of a statue of someone sitting on a horse and looking like he knows where he is heading. I don't know about the truth. I only know of mine. I had to read that a few times the first time I came across it. And here's what stuck out to me about that. Um, I think I chatted with you a bit about this, when we had a chance to speak on the phone, but the ways in which, again, you're giving life and voice to your perception, but you're so open and charitable to basically like, listen, I realize this is how I'm seeing it. That, this might not be actually the way things are. And can you speak a little bit about what do we want to call this? Kind of contemplative charity, if you will. I don't know what to call it because, again, for me, and I find myself doing this. So a little bit about me. I have an MFA in fiction, but I actually, when I did my low res program, I was admitted for fiction and creative nonfiction. And so, since I began in fiction, I just stayed with that. I didn't have it in me to do two theses
Yeah,
and
yeah.
two sets of research projects. But all of that being said, one of the reasons that I shifted over to fiction was my insecurities around, okay, if I'm writing creative nonfiction, how do I keep this from being navel gazing? How do I really, you know, have my perception, but then also have the space for objectivity? And I didn't feel I was mature enough as a writer to really bring that to the table. But here you're saying it, openly. So can you talk a little bit about that? Is that again, like something innately you've always told stories in that way where the truth is porous, or did you just come to a point in your nonfiction writing where you're like, okay, this is a memory from my childhood, but okay, that's how I experienced it, but maybe there are other pieces that are missing, because I just find that generally we're in such a polarizing times. It People tend, even when they're wrong about something, just to double down. And, I feel that spills over into the writing, if that makes any sense. So I'm sorry to be a little convoluted there, but
No, no, no. I appreciate the question very much because it's something that I came to late in life as I got older. I was very certain, as a young person about a lot of things. Um, and as I grew older, I realized that certainty is not my friend. That
mm,
um, that doubt, uh, openly stated and explored, could lead me to an understanding, but certainty wouldn't lead me to understanding. It would be like, okay, this is the way the world is. This is how nuclear physics works. It only works one way. Okay, I understand that part. But when I start writing about uh, memories, then I have to be very clear that it's my side of the street that I'm talking about and not anyone else's side, right? So that's where that line comes from, um, because I don't know. Um, what I see sometimes could be very hazy and mystifying, and I have to admit that is mystifying. Because I'm not sure that other people would see it quite that way. So especially when in this collection, there's a lot about my parents and my older sister. She was my only uh, sibling. They've all passed away, and I had to think long and hard. And I do think about that is when I'm writing about my um, memories of them, my interactions with them, um, I have to be very clear that it is not about blaming them one way or the other. I also have to be careful that uh, they were real people and that I can only speak from my perspective.
Mm.
And I have to say that if there's doubt, I have to own that doubt clearly in my writing. Because if I were writing something else and uh, I was, it meant that I needed to take a stand on something, that would be different. But memory is, as it is so amorphous and so fluid. Perspective is everything. Uh, so I try to stay as close as possible to the bone. Um, you know, I don't know, I can't remember who said this, but said that the writer who said that the closer you get to the bone, the better it's going to be.
I
Yes.
think it was James Baldwin,
There you go. Yeah,
possibly. He said you want a
if it,
sentence as
yeah,
clean as a bone, something to that effect.
yeah. I mean, if it doesn't hurt, it's you're not digging hard enough. Uh,
Hmm. Okay. Yeah, it's very, I mean, to be facetious, I'm very anti Malcolm Gladwell, which I mean, he's a great writer, but sometimes he gets so into the fact that, oh, look at this observation that I'm making. Nobody else could have made this
yeah, it
observation.
is
And it's
so
just like,
it is so
really, is that
funny
the
that you
case?
say that because um, my ex-wife, and I don't think she would mind saying that she was Gladwell's editor for a while, and uh, and uh, she didn't like the leaps that he took, especially after um, he got going, after he became famous and was churning out stuff, because these articles would come out and they'd be a smidgen of an idea, and Gladwell would take off. I stopped reading for that reason because, yeah,
A lot
because
of
of the
conflation.
leaps. Yeah, and it was God's own truth, and it wasn't. Yeah, it was a perspective that he had, and a clear perspective, certainly. But that's not how it was presented. It was presented as socioeconomic, sociocultural truth. Yeah, yeah,
I had read a bit of him, but then I was an adjunct at NYU for a couple of years, and I was required to, teach from it. And I'm just like, I'm reading. So I read, I'm sorry, I'm just at this point, now that
yeah,
I'm in my 40s for some reason, I can't remember the name of anything. So I'm not saying that everybody in 40s has that issue, but I do. So anywho, I'm just like, his two most, popular works, I read them cover to cover and I had to teach from them. And I'm like, this guy's, I just, should
yeah,
first year students, should this really be the text that we're teaching from? I mean, excerpts are fine, but just some, like you said, those leaps in logic, like my perception as, illuminating a correlation that may or may not be true,
yeah,
but because of the force of the writing, he doesn't really give you room for that, if that makes sense. Like it's like, oh, if you disagree with him, then it's kind of like, oh, well, you just don't see what I see. Whereas your voice is very, again, open and refreshing. And it's like, okay, observations that I'm putting together, but I recognize and entertain the fact that other people might have experienced this differently, might see this differently.
yeah, yeah.
So Amit, here is what I'll do. So my current Zoom account for this, they allow me to do 40-minute meetings. And we have
Okay.
about 5 minutes left in this meeting. But I think what it would be best would be to hop off and then hop back on, and then you can read an excerpt, and then we can maybe do a couple more questions and then wrap up.
Okay. Sounds
Yeah,
good.
yeah, because I don't want the Zoom to cut off while you're reading.
Okay. Thanks.
All right, folks. So if you are watching this on the playback on Instagram or YouTube, we're going to have a part two here where we get to hear from Amit reading from his work, Revisiting the Minds. All right, just a sec.
See you in a bit.
Okay.